Alright, I'm recording this again because the first time I forgot to click off a certain audio, so it has like this weird double voice effect on it, so I had to record this all over again. So I'm talking about Revolutionary Suicide. It's a book about Huey Newton and the Black Panther Party, and it goes over Huey Newton's life and certain events of the Black Panther Party. Now it's mostly about Huey Newton's life. It covers his childhood, a little bit of his family, his adolescence, adulthood. It stops at a certain point. It doesn't. It's written by Huey Newton along with another author, I believe. I'm not sure who. Of course, do your own research on this. This is just a brief overview. I just want to talk about a couple of things about the what that I like and the significance of it, the importance and certain significant figures that were in the book that also I recommend books by. So, first and foremost, Huey Newton is a co-founder of the Black Panther Party. If you do not know, if you don't know who the Black Panther Party was, it was a pro-black organization, and they mostly are recognized for putting in a lot of different programs that are even here today, and a lot of different organizations that influence from them. They have another Black Panther Party, but it's a whole different thing. A lot of the original members of the Black Panther Party don't even recognize them. So okay, so heading towards Huey Newton's, life. Of course, I'm gonna cover a little bit of the book so you have a understanding what I'm talking about. So Huey Newton was born, I believe, in Louisiana at a certain. I'm not about to go super into details. It's not a documentary. If you want to read the book yourself, I recommend it. But if you're looking for like a documentary type thing, I'm not about to do that. So, he was born in Louisiana. He moved to Oakland. From there, he went to school, and to his own account, he wasn't exactly the smartest kid in the room. He definitely had his, shortcomings and pitfalls, and he never liked to be embarrassed. He did not like when teachers tried to embarrass him. So, but he always had a rebellious spirit, even as a kid. He took inspiration from his dad. His dad always stood up to white individuals or, people threatening him and his family. His dad never, cowered down or anything. And he, really took, pride in that. And he carried it with him throughout his whole entire life. So, a certain aspect of Huey Newton that has to be addressed. Early in his life, he did, commit crimes. It was a thing. He was in the streets. Growing up in Oakland is not exactly a nice place. It is definitely rough, even back then, especially with racism and discrimination running rampant throughout the system and in different neighborhoods and stuff. So he had to grow up a little bit fast. Now, of course, he did have a two-parent household. He did have brothers and sisters, but that did not stop him from. So, around the end of high school, going into college, Huey Newton did not go the traditional route of having a degree plan and getting a regular degree. He did, of course, get his honorary doctors, I believe, and he did study at different, universities, speak at a lot of different universities later on in his life. But early on in his life, he did not really take the traditional route. He took classes he had an interest in. He really liked philosophy and the social climate and stuff like that. So he took interest in those type of classes, and was at college. He did, of course, have a dorm, apartment, whatever you want to call it. So during the day, he would go to classes, but at night or towards when the class was over, he would go on the block. Always went back to the streets and always, gave back to the community and always showed love to the community. That was one of his, I would say, probably his concrete things he always stood about, was always being about the community and putting people first. He was never about him and his own personal interests. It was always about the community, helping out black people and different other minorities, and creating change and a revolution. So, before he got to that point, of course, he did take inspiration from around that time Cuba was having a revolution with Fidel Castro. He did side with Fidel Castro, and that caused a snowball effect. He did try to get into different other black organizations, but he found problems and contradictory actions and statements by them that he didn't really agree with. So as a result, with him and Bobby Seale, I don't know exactly when he met Bobby Seale off the top of my head, but at some point, him and Bobby Seale started the Black Panther Party. And from there, it started out very small. They did not just, start out with a huge numbers. I believe it was like him and a couple of other guys. He started recruiting at different bars and pool halls and things of that nature, or on the street. If you would say like on corners and stuff, he would talk to different individuals that he knew from the streets and try to recruit them into the Black Panther Party. When the Black Panther Party gained, I would say, national recognition, will probably be, I think, a situation where Huey P. Newton and a couple other individuals started, protecting the black community from the police who were crooked at the time, because these were back during pretty bad times for black people. A lot of discrimination, racism at the time. So he and the rest of the growing number of Black Panther Party members, they started arming themselves, with weapons, shotguns, rifles, and they started basically being protectors of the community. Whenever police would, show police brutality or have incidents where they were abusing their power, they would step in and pretty much put a stop to it. And of course, this caused a lot of controversy with him because this was not normal. This was never seen before. Black people arming themselves and coming in this very militant, non-nonsense way. They were used to black people pretty much just, I don't know, they just had their way with them pretty much. They were never met with resistance, like in numbers, on a consistent basis. Of course, they had isolated incidents, but they never had a mass group of people coming together, organized, not letting things happen and putting their foot down and saying, no, this is wrong. So of course, they didn't like this and they framed it for different crimes and things of that nature. And he spent a good portion of his life in jail and prison. Not all of it, but a good majority, especially during certain heights of the Black Panther Party, movement and revolution and stuff like that. He was pretty much in solitary confinement. Now, of course, he did write and contribute. They did have a popular newspaper at the time. He did make a lot of allies in terms of, Stokely Carmichael. I want to say George Jackson. He was the founder of the Black Guerrilla Party. No, Black Guerrilla Family. Sorry about that. Completely sorry. Black Guerrilla Family, and him and George are pretty close. They wrote to each other pretty frequently. I think George was on a whole different facility, prison facility, and Huey P. Newton was on a whole different prison facility. So they wrote back to each other. George Jackson got an honorary, Black Panther Party membership. Sorry, it's saying Black Panther Party a lot. It's just, it's a tongue twister. So he got his honorary membership. He did write in the newspaper pretty frequently. He did contribute a lot of writings to the Black Panther Party. And I think probably the main problem or consistent issue with the Black Panther Party was, well, first, Huey P. Newton was in prison most of the time. He was in solitary confinement, so he had his own issues going on. But also, I want to say Huey P. Newton had a certain way going about things. When he was out on the streets and he was taking control, things went in a certain direction. But while he was locked up, and Bobby Seale got locked up too at certain points in the Black Panther Party's history. So without their two founding leaders, they had to distribute the power throughout different individuals. And of course, people had different visions. And when no one's out to really tell them not to do certain things, it kind of goes haywire, especially when certain men were sent overseas and sent to certain, events and things of that nature to try to make certain things happen, it wouldn't go as planned. So it's a lot of different things, a lot of different individuals that play a part in the Black Panther Party, good and bad. Different factions that were internal struggles. Of course, you had the government that was literally infiltrating the Black Panther Party and causing a lot of trouble, starting crimes and stuff and blaming it on them, even though they were informants. A lot of different men were assassinated and targeted by the police. There were there were numerous shootouts across the country involving the Black Panther parties and the police. Um, a lot of different cases of police brutality, people not really different people had a lot of different opinions about them, but they always had the people's best interests at heart. So, I would say probably the most interesting aspect of the book to me was seeing Huey P. Newton's transformation. I would say when he first started out in the beginning of the book, he kind of started out very radical and wild, and towards the middle of the book, he kind of settled down a bit and you kind of see him kind of focus his energy in one direction. And towards the later half of the book, you kind of see where he pretty much became the person that we all, or that some people recognize as, the unified leader, organizer that he's pretty much known for. Now, of course, in prison, he was dealt with a lot of problems, and I don't know how to way to put this. He faced a lot of course, he faced normal, prison things that come with being in jail and prison, but it was kind of amplified because of who he was, and because of who he was, and he was a notified figure in the community. He was placed in lockdown and confinement a lot. He wasn't really allowed to mingle with the rest of the population. He did have his certain people in there that he did, communicate with, but it wasn't in like general population. So he was pretty much under 24/7 watch. He wasn't really allowed to come out much. Like I said, he was placed in confinement most of the time. But to many people, and even myself, he did not break under any circumstances. He worked out a lot. He kept his mental fortitude. He mastered his thoughts, and he pretty much never let up. He always, applied pressure to that. Always kept. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the timeline in my head and tell y'all at the same time without confusing y'all. And so he did that a lot. Like I said, they had the newspaper. They were contributing a lot to the different programs that they, that they created. He had different members over those. He had to keep all of those in order and keep all of those running, fully functional. His legal issues towards the end of the book, he details a lot of the trials and things of that nature. I'm not gonna lie, it spans like 3 or 4 chapters, and I was not here for it. It was interesting at first, seeing how evidence was tampered with and how they tried to play mind games in the trials and stuff. But for the most part, it was pretty much about his legal issues, which, to be honest, and not to be an asshole, that was a big thing. They were trying to give him, a life sentence or like a really long sentence, and it weighed down on his mental and his family a lot. He did have to go to a lot of trials and mistrials, and they dropped the case, picked up the case, different cases. The racism that went on in the justice system at the time, as far as like having an all-white jury, how they never let certain people testify, how they tampered with witnesses. He always maintained his faith as far as believing in himself and his family. He wasn't really religious. It details his personality and a lot of things. He covers a lot of issues towards, I would say, I don't want to say the middle of the book. Before he gets to the middle of the book, and it's not exactly the beginning of the book, he does talk about his beliefs, a lot of things he does believe in, his passions, things he disagrees with. He does have a lot of disagreements with a lot of different individuals in the black movement. Not exactly within his own organization, but other organizations and other prominent figures during that time. Like I said, this was during this time where they had Malcolm X, they had Stokely Carmichael. This wasn't exactly the civil rights movement that was before. This is a little bit more further ahead, in time. So I guess you can call it the pro-black era. That's like a loose term. I could probably sum it up in a quick sentence. It was pretty much that. So he did have a lot of gripes about different people, how they weren't exactly for black people, or they would say one thing and then they would switch, or they would contradict themselves, or it was. But I do recommend the book for those who have not read it. I don't want to make this too long. It's already almost at 20 minutes. I'm looking down here at the little timestamp, and I do recommend it. I do think people should read this book for different reasons, especially if you're African American. It's a must read for black males. I think you can learn a lot about, dealing with oppression and different discriminatory issues, learning the law. He did talk about that a lot. He even carried a law book with him at all times to deal with the police that detailed a lot of different things. It's a lot to learn from this book. It's definitely a very important book, especially in black history. I think a lot of people should read this book, even if you're not African American. You know, it's still a very important book to read to just understand different struggles within America's history and how they influence different things today and at the time. So, with that being said, I'm going to catch you guys on the next one. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you later.